Tonight, you're going to heat something up without thinking twice about it. A pan on a stove, a microwave hum, maybe just boiling water for tea. It feels automatic, it feels small. But that tiny act connects you to a decision made almost 2 million years ago, a decision so strange and so risky that it rewired the entire trajectory of your species. Your ancestors chose fire, and that choice built your brain. Here's the strange part. Cooking should never have worked as a survival strategy. Think about it. Fire is dangerous. It burns you. It burns the forest around you. Managing it takes time, attention, fuel. Every hour spent tending flames is an hour not spent foraging, not spent resting, not spent watching for predators. On paper, cooking looks like a terrible trade. So why did your ancestors make it anyway? The answer starts in the gut. Literally, raw food is hard work. Chimpanzees, your closest living relatives, spend nearly half of their waking hours just chewing. Tough, fibrous plants. Raw meat that resists every bite. Their jaws are massive. Their guts are long and complicated, built to slowly wring out whatever nutrition they can from food that fights back the whole way down. For most of primate history, that was simply the cost of being alive. Chew constantly. Digest slowly. Extract what you can. Then something changed. Around 1.9 million years ago, the fossil record shows a body plan that doesn't fit the old rules. Smaller teeth, a smaller gut, and most strikingly, a brain that begins to balloon in size. This creature is Homo erectus, and its body looks like it's already banking on a different kind of food. Softer, easier to break down, richer in available energy. But what could possibly deliver that much more nutrition, that reliably, that early? Fire. Harvard biological anthropologist Richard Wrangham built an entire theory around this exact puzzle. He argued that cooking wasn't a nice cultural bonus that showed up late in human history. It was the engine. Heat breaks down tough plant fibers before your teeth ever touch them. It denatures proteins in meat, unwinding them so your stomach doesn't have to fight as hard. Cooking, in a very real sense, is digestion that happens outside your body. And that changes the entire energy equation of being human. Here's where it gets interesting. If cooking hands your body pre-digested calories, your body doesn't need such an enormous gut to process raw material anymore. The intestines can shrink, and digestion is expensive. It burns a huge share of your daily energy budget. So if you need less gut, you suddenly have energy left over. Spare fuel, spare metabolic room. Where did that spare energy go? Straight to the brain. Your brain is brutally expensive tissue. At rest, it burns roughly 20% of your body's total energy, despite being only about 2% of your body weight. No other organ comes close to that ratio. A brain that size simply cannot exist on a diet of raw, fibrous, hard-to-digest food. There isn't enough surplus energy to run it. But a cooked diet changes the math completely. More usable calories, extracted faster, with less digestive cost. Suddenly, growing a bigger brain becomes biologically affordable. This is not just theory sitting in a journal somewhere. Harvard researcher Rachel Carmody tested it directly. She fed mice diets of raw meat, raw sweet potato, and cooked sweet potato, then tracked body weight and energy gained. Across the board, cooked food delivered significantly more usable energy than the same food raw, even when calorie counts on paper looked identical. Heat wasn't just softening food, it was unlocking energy that raw digestion left behind on the table. But energy is only half the story. What about the danger? Controlling fire meant something else too. It meant light after sunset, for the first time in the history of any hominin. It meant warmth that let bodies push into colder climates. And it meant something almost as important as calories: protection. Fire keeps predators at a distance. A flickering perimeter of light becomes a wall that claws and fangs won't easily cross. For a slow, weak, small-toothed primate on the African savanna, that kind of protection wasn't a luxury. It was survival. And there's evidence written directly into ancient stone. At sites like Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, researchers have found burned bone fragments and ashed plant remains dated to roughly 1 million years ago, deep inside the cave, far from any lightning strike that could have started a natural blaze. That depth matters. It suggests controlled, carried fire, not an accident of nature. Somebody brought flame into the dark on purpose and kept it burning. Think about what this meant for a body under constant threat. Early hominins weren't apex predators. They were slow. They had no claws worth mentioning, no fangs, no thick hide. On the open savanna, darkness was the most dangerous part of any day, the hours when lions, hyenas, and leopards hunted freely. A single flame changed that equation instantly. Predators avoid fire instinctively. So for the first time, sleep itself became safer. And safer sleep means deeper sleep, more consistent rest, a nervous system that isn't running on constant low-grade alertness through the night. What might a species do with all that recovered rest? It grows, it thinks, it remembers. There's also a piece of this story that rarely gets attention. What cooking did to meat specifically. Raw meat carries real risk. Parasites, bacteria, pathogens that can sicken or kill, especially in a world with no medicine and no antibiotics. Heat destroys most of that danger before it ever reaches your stomach. So cooking wasn't only about extracting more calories. It was also about survival in a much more direct sense, cutting down the odds of dying from the very food meant to keep you alive. Every generation that cooked its meat was a generation slightly less likely to be taken out by something invisible, something living inside the food itself. Now picture the physical anatomy again, because it tells its own quiet story. Compare a chimpanzee's skull to an early Homo erectus skull side by side. The chimpanzee's jaw juts forward, anchored by huge chewing muscles that attach across a ridge on top of the skull. That ridge exists because raw, fibrous food demands serious mechanical force to break down. Now look at Homo erectus. The jaw is smaller. The face is flatter. The chewing muscles are far less dominant. Something had already started doing the hardest work of digestion before the food ever touched a tooth. That something was fire. Once fire enters daily life, everything downstream shifts. Meals stop being a solitary scramble for whatever you can chew fastest. Cooking takes coordination. Someone gathers fuel, someone tends the flame, someone prepares the food. And once the meal is ready, everyone eats together at the same time, around the same source of light and heat. Does that sound familiar? It should. That's dinner. That's the shape of a family meal, echoing across nearly 2 million years, virtually unchanged. That shared fire likely reshaped behavior as much as biology. Sitting together after dark, with nothing left to do but watch flames and talk, may have pushed early language and storytelling forward in ways that daylight foraging never could. There was, for the first time, unstructured time. Time with nothing urgent to survive. What do you fill that kind of time with? You talk, you plan, you bond. So the fire that cooked your ancestors' food may have also cooked something else into existence. The habit of gathering, the ritual of the shared meal, the long conversation after the sun goes down. Consider how deeply that pattern still shapes you. Birthdays, holidays, first dates. Business deals closed over dinner. Grief processed at a kitchen table with a warm dish between two people who don't know what else to say. Almost every major emotional moment in your life gets staged around food, and usually around cooked food specifically. That isn't random cultural decoration layered on top of biology. It's the echo of a survival strategy that happened to also be the birthplace of connection. Why else would sharing a meal feel like one of the most intimate things two people can do? The timeline of all this matters too, because it wasn't sudden. Evidence for controlled fire use appears gradually across the archaeological record, growing more common and more consistent from roughly 1 million years ago onward, before becoming a near-universal feature of human sites by around 400,000 years ago. That's not an overnight invention. That's hundreds of thousands of years of trial, of loss, of relearning after fires went out and had to be captured again from lightning strikes or smouldering embers. Every early hearth you can trace in the fossil record represents an unbroken chain of people who refused to let the flame die. None of this required your ancestors to understand any of it consciously. Nobody sat by a fire debating gut length or caloric efficiency. They simply noticed something obvious and immediate. Cooked food tasted better. It was easier to eat. It filled them up faster and kept them full longer. Evolution didn't need intention. It only needed an advantage, repeated often enough, generation after generation, until brains grew, guts shrank, and an entire species became dependent on something that isn't even alive, flame, and you are still dependent on it, every single day. You have never eaten a fully raw diet, not once in your life, and if you tried, your body would struggle. Raw food studies on modern humans consistently show something remarkable. People eating strictly raw diets tend to lose weight and struggle to maintain healthy energy levels, even when they eat as much as they physically can. Your gut is not built for raw living anymore. It hasn't been for close to 2 million years. You inherited the small intestine, the small teeth, and the energy-hungry brain of a species that outsourced its digestion to fire, generation after generation, until there was no going back. So tonight, when you turn that dial on the stove, or press start on the microwave, you're not just making dinner. You're repeating the oldest trade your ancestors ever made. Trade the raw for the cooked. Trade chewing time for thinking time. Trade a longer gut for a bigger brain. It's a trade so old, so deeply written into your biology, that you don't even experience it as a choice anymore. It just feels like being human. Tonight, you're going to heat something up without thinking twice about it. And now you know exactly why you can't help it.